Hello, everyone.
Hey,
Can you
hey,
can you hear me now?
I can hear you
Come,
now. And
coming.
we're not going on Instagram
Oh,
because we have to upgrade. So we'll do that. We'll do that within the next few weeks.
okay. Coming to you live from Wanton, Kentucky.
Where the
And
heck is that?
aren't you wanting to know?
Yeah,
It's
where's my husband? Where in the world is my husband?
it's in Florence, in Erlanger area.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all I know.
It's kind of in the. So is it like in the boonies or is it by a city? Is it?
Oh, it's no, it's not the boonies. It's right next to a freeway with. There isn't much here besides a truck stop and a Wendy's across the street. Two truck stops.
Oh, okay. Well, at least you've got some Wi-Fi, so we can. And we've got to get going tonight because you're supposed to be shipping off here in an hour.
Yes,
So, um,
my partner will be here about 8 o'clock. So if I need to check out sooner than that, I apologize, but it'll be quick and painless. I promise.
yeah, and I'll and I'll have to take over. I'll have to take over the whole thing. So
Okay.
so let's dive in. Let's dive in. And thanks for joining us, everybody. Welcome to Deservingly You. This is where we talk about what it takes to rebuild after systems of control and learn how we can live self-led lives. I'm Shannon Avery Briggs. I'm an ex-Jehovah's Witness and certified transformational resilience coach, and I'm also the co-founder of Luminous Connections and the Exit Generation movement. We also have Ruby and we have King Tony. So welcome, you guys. Thanks
Oh,
for joining
nice.
us.
Thank you.
So last week we sat with what you lost and the losses that a few people can even validate. So tonight, what we want to do is what we're gonna do with that is what do you do with the grief once you feel it? Because once it has your attention, the next question is where does it go? And so here's our goal for tonight. By the end, you'll be introduced to the 4 ideas in relation to processing the pain of grief.
Welcome, everyone. Appreciate you being here. I'm John Briggs, also an ExJW certified transformational resilience coach, co-founder of Luminous Connections as well. And yeah, this one's personal for me as well. We're going to build on my story from last week as going forward in a little bit and walk through what it was like and identifying each element of what happened to me a couple weeks ago. Actually, just last week, I think it was. But that being said, like we talked about last week, grief found me, and knowing what to do with it helped me to process that and get through it.
Yep. So let us know in the chat, how hot is it where you're at right now here in Maricopa, Arizona? It is 103 degrees. And also, where are you watching us from? Let us know if you're catching this live or on replay. And if conversations like this matter to you, please share, like, and subscribe. Hit that notify button so that you don't miss what's coming up next. So with that, let's dive into it, shall we? So
Yay.
we always want to set the space, and this is that space for reflection, not for reactions. And so we invite you to practice curiosity over judgment and awareness over self-criticism. And we want to look at what might be happening or coming up within us right now. And so when we do that, we can move forward with a little more clarity. So go ahead and use the chat, share what stands out and share what surfaces, but do it with curiosity. So 87 in Florida is what Ruby says. We want you back, Ruby, too. We're working at it. We want you back to make my life easier.
I'll be in Florida tomorrow, making my deliveries. So it is humid there, indeed. So if I want to say this: if something lands tonight and you don't have words for it, just notice it. See where it sits, and if listening is all that you can manage to do, that's fine. That counts as well. We appreciate you regardless, obviously. But this is about you, not where you've been, but how you're meeting yourself right now in order to move forward with intention.
Yeah. So where we're going to go tonight, sometimes grief doesn't look like grief. And sometimes it can leak and affect us in areas where we may not initially recognize. And so we're going to introduce the idea of 4 elements of a grief window and one that you can control.
And as I mentioned a minute ago, we're going to revisit my recent experience, and Shannon's going to share a recent one as well that she had, so we can let you hear some lived examples of this in action. All right. Finally, you can have some ideas to prepare in the event of a grief wave if it hits you. So with that, let's get started.
Yep. And it looks like when I downloaded when I opened up my PowerPoint, some of the titles moved around on me tonight. So hopefully the rest of the slides didn't do that, because I had to close it and reopen it. So it did some funky things. So if by chance they're funky, I'm human, and that's the way that we're just going to roll with it. And it is what it is. Okay, so just a quick orientation before we dive in, because the work can change depending on where you're at in your journey. And so if you watched our show before, you've seen this before. This is that exit generation roadmap. It's 5 phases, and tonight we're continuing in phase 2, where we allow the grief.
Yep. And last week we sat with what you actually lost. The losses, a few people in your life, can name, even fewer can validate, right? Tonight is what comes after that. And once you've named it, where does it go? What do you do with it? And how can you help it? So what's it look like to process it? And because grief needs somewhere to sit and to be.
Yep. So that's the piece that we're going to be working on tonight. So here in the audience, there may be 2 types of you with us. One of you may have just woke up, and so those losses may feel immediate. You've got the family that's not picking up the phone, a community that vanished, a version of God that you thought that you knew, and it's really loud and it's everywhere.
Yep. And there's also another one of us who's been out for some time, and the grief may have kind of settled down and quieted a bit. And it doesn't always look like grief anymore, right? It may look like just kind of flat, and like having a hard time getting out of bed, like maybe a marriage that's tense for whatever reasons. And you can't quite put a name to it. Both of you are in the right place tonight, I assure you. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So this is where the work shifts, is like knowing that there isn't the final answer. Knowing what to do with it is. That's part of the work. And so, like we said, we've got 4 ideas and 4 ways into something that most of us in the past were never taught how to hold. So what do you do with the grief once you know it's there? So these are the 4 areas that we're going to be walking through tonight, those 4 elements and we call these 4 elements together a one grief window. That word window really matters, because a window has a beginning and an end, and that word, when you open it, you let what's there be there, and then when you close it, here's the thing that I really want to make sure that you recognize too. It doesn't mean that the grief is gone. It just means that the next time it shows up, you may be able to handle it differently and have something to work with it. So you're able to, the window, you can open it up a little bit easier this time, and you can move through it a little bit easier, and you can choose to close it again. So that can be the difference between when we process a grief versus being ambushed by it. it doesn't mean that the grief ends. It's that you stop having to carry all of that all at one time, especially not having nowhere, you don't have anywhere to put it. And so that first piece is recognition. And for a lot of us, this ends up being one of the hardest ones, because the grief that we got, that language was different. So as kids, it might have been just tears. And that's almost never how it shows up when we're out, now that we're outside of the organization. When we're in the organization, it was often reframed as something different. Whereas on the outside, it might show up as exhaustion that you can't explain, or anger that you don't even know how to trace, or even, like John had talked about earlier, a sense of flatness. And that second piece is why the grief leaks. So when you don't give it that place to go, it's not gonna disappear. So in a sense, it's like it goes underground, and it has the opportunity to come out sideways in places that we weren't expecting. And so we're going to spend some time there in a few minutes.
Yep, and you can see there in the third piece is the container. Container is a safe place for the grief to be, and somewhere it gets, it actually gets to actually be there. So without anyone trying to fix it, without you having to perform right around it. And the fourth, the one most people skip, is the closing ritual. Mm-hmm. This one matters because in the org, things didn't get closed, right? They just ended, right? They just cut. And people left you, or people left and you didn't get to say goodbye. You got told to stop talking to someone overnight, perhaps. So the muscle for closing things with purpose, a lot of us just don't have it as of yet. That's the muscle we're trying to build on this week. And here's the thing about that muscle. Once you have it, you can use it again. The next time grief shows up, and it will, you'll know how to process that and what to do with it.
Yeah. So recognition, the leak, the container, and the close. These are the four pieces of that window that when you can choose to open. And we're gonna talk about all four of these tonight. And so by the end, you'll have some ideas to consider and that you can take forward and see if any of them will work for you, see if they'll apply for your life. Because like we've said over and over, this isn't about our way is 100% right. We want to bring forward ideas to help people move forward. Okay, so let's start with the first piece, recognition. And one of the things I want to tell you about that happened to me this past month is I recently started this supplement that was to help me support a lymph detox. And being a survivor of cancer, paying attention to your lymph system is really, really important. And so I did this as a way to support my body. And then after I'd been on it a period of time, it was like out of nowhere, this anxiety overcame me. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. Nothing's going on that should bring on this feeling of anxiety and that sensation of anxiety. And so one of the things I did do is I supported myself by increasing my magnesium, and that did help. And then a few days later, what ended up happening is I experienced blues. And so similar to the way that the anxiety hit, the blues hit, and it was almost like a light sense of grief. And once again, there was nothing going on in my life that should trigger that type of response. And so I did choose to take it easy. And I made sure to keep that magnesium up as well, because that can help with stress and things. And so you'd think that would be it, right? Well, then I ended up experiencing low motivation. And I knew that I needed to prepare for tonight's show, and it felt really heavy. And it was the kind of weight that you couldn't quite figure it out. And so, like I said, I use magnesium. Magnesium is like one of those magical supplements. And then I also make sure that I increased my water, especially since I was doing a detox and I rested. The other thing that I did was pictured whatever was locked in my body was actually releasing. I didn't ever figure out what it was about. No memories came up or anything like that, but I did acknowledge it. And that ended up being enough for this round. And so here's one of the things that I invite you to notice is in the past, I may have tried to ignore it. Those feelings, I might have tried to ignore it and push it down. But I may have made myself busy or told myself that I was fine. But this time, no, I said, this is something and it's allowed to be here. And Linda said that it sounds like clinical depression to me. No, it was not. It felt it. I've been diagnosed with clinical depression in the past. It was not that, not at all. I could actually feel other things going on with the supplement. It wasn't just the emotions that were coming on. There were other things along with it. And so, but I did, it was interesting to recognize as this was going through and how it eased after a while. Because I also had aches. You know, there were certain aches, especially in lymph areas that would last for, you know, maybe a couple hours or something like that, and then they would release. It would be gone.
Yeah, what's crazy about that, Shannon's story, that is, that she didn't have a date, you know, to coincide with all that. She didn't have a memory she could point to. She didn't have a trigger that she could name, just her body, right, that was finally safe enough to let something go. You could say, and that's what recognition can look like. Sometimes it's not a thought, it's a feeling or some type of physical reaction that shows up before the thought has actually caught up, right? And in there, that's the kind of thing that many of us were taught to ignore, okay? You couldn't explain why you felt bad. The answer was you were ungrateful. It kind of rings true for me, you know, or you weren't praying enough, or there was sin in your life you weren't dealing with. The idea that your body might just be releasing something that had been sitting there for years, like storing up, stacking, that just wasn't on the menu, so to speak. So part of recognition is learning a new question. Okay, not what's wrong with me, but what is my body trying to tell me, signal, you know, and bring to my attention.
Yeah. And I personally am thankful for the journey that I went through with the cancer journey, because that did help me to learn how to ask that question. And so that shift from what's wrong with me to what is my body telling me is that whole first piece. And it's been a huge lesson for me in my own personal journey, because the moment that you start listening, you can start doing the work. And not every time do you need to name it or fix it, but being able to recognize it and notice it, that's the key. That's that recognition. And John made the comment that it's like saying it hits you later. Yep, exactly. All right. So I want to make sure that, oops, I skipped a page. So, so that's how grief ended up finding me this round, kind of like what John was saying, you know, it hits you later. It was through my body and through that detox. There wasn't any memory or conversation. It was just like an energetic wave that came in, and my body let it. But it doesn't always show up that way. Like we heard from John last week, it can look completely different. If you remember his experience, he's going to talk about it a little bit more here in a second. And between the two of us, you might see your own version here some way.
Yeah. So mine showed up earlier this month too. Like I shared last week. Okay, I called Shannon one day and I was very upset, crying, sobbing, and I couldn't quite put my finger on what was going on. Uh, I had this overwhelming sense of I just want to be home. And but for a while there, if you'd asked me what was wrong, I would have had to say I just didn't know. I hadn't quite put my finger on it yet, and I would have been embarrassed about it because in there you were supposed to have a reason, right? Feelings were supposed to make sense. Yeah, in the org that is, if you couldn't explain it, you were supposed to push it down until it went away. Okay, pray it away or whatever. So me on the phone crying with no explanation. Years ago, I wouldn't have picked up the phone. That's what I'm trying to say. And there would have been a good chance that I would have relapsed, and buried those feelings with alcohol and drugs to ease the pain, because that was the only tool I had in my toolbox at the time. But this time I didn't. Of course, I picked up the phone. I just let it take its course. Let move through it. So Shannon and we talked. I don't even remember what we talked about exactly, but I just remember I calmed down. The next day, I figured out what it was. It was Tomas's birthday, and the several days before it had been the anniversary of when he had passed. In a sense, the calendar knew. I just wasn't putting it together. So. Yeah. So I definitely didn't forget the day. I just didn't. Yeah, I didn't put it together.
Yeah. So if you look at the two of us, my energy grief showed up with no story attached to it, and whereas John's showed up with a story underneath that he actually couldn't even see yet. And so between the two of us, it had to go somewhere. And so for me, mine was rest, having the dogs near me, being quiet, having my own body, and his was that phone call. And so the other thing too is neither one of us tried to figure it out. We didn't analyze it. We didn't try to earn it or anything like that. We just gave it a place to be. And so that's the connection between our two stories. The shape on the outside might have looked completely different, but underneath it was that same move to recognize and to make the room for it, let that energy move. And that's what, that first element of this grief window, that recognition, that's what that opens the door to. Yeah, Linda. Yeah, our bodies definitely remembered. And thanks for clarifying the symptoms of the depression. And that makes total sense. So now I want to talk about why this can be so hard for so many of us. Because if you've been out for a while and you may be sitting there thinking, I don't even know what grief feels like, there could be a reason for that. So for a lot of us, grief never got to be grief. It was actually renamed. So it may have been renamed as a faith problem. If you're really trusting Jehovah, you wouldn't be so sad about this. So the sadness became evidence that your faith was weak, and evidence that you needed to work on yourself spiritually. And the grief itself was the problem, not the loss that was underneath that grief. Another thing is, another way that it may have been renamed was as selfishness. If you were really, really focused on the kingdom, you wouldn't be making it about you. There's so many bigger things at stake than what you're dealing with and what your feelings are. People are dying without this. So how dare you sit and be sad about your own life when there's a world to warn? Another way is it may have been renamed as ingratitude. Look at everything you have. Look at the paradise that's coming. And why would you be sad now? You should be the most grateful person on the earth. And if you're not, something has to be wrong with you. And when none of those look, then the grief wouldn't leave. Then it was a spiritual exercise, right? We got to pray harder. We got to study more. We got to get out in service. We got to push it down with more activity until this stops bothering you. Not one of those was real care. And not one of them gave the grief someplace to go. They gave you a new way to blame yourself for having it.
Yeah. And I want you to hear what that did over time. Okay? Because if every time you felt something, you got told it was a sign of something being wrong with you, eventually you stop feeling it, you know? Or more accurately, you stop letting yourself know that you're feeling it and acknowledging and processing, okay? The grief is still there. It just learned to disguise itself. It learned to arrive as anxiety, as flat, as some sort of, just flat feeling, as low motivation, or as a body that just won't sleep, right? And as maybe perhaps as a marriage that's tense for reasons you can't quite put your finger on. Okay, because those were allowed. Real grief was shut out. It just wasn't. So if you're out here now and you're trying to figure out why nothing feels like grief, but everything's just so heavy, this could be a part of the reasons why. You spent years being trained out of recognizing it, okay? That's not a flaw in you. That's what the system did, okay? Conditioning. And I want to say one more thing. If something's landing for you right now, and you're not sure what it is, but you can feel it sitting in your chest, just sit with it for a second. You don't have to name it, tonight, right now, but you don't have to do anything with it, but you may already be grieving. You may have been grieving for years, and you may have never had permission to call it that or to recognize it as such.
Yeah. Linda, I love that John said it. He calls it the paradise syndrome. That's a great term.
Yeah, I like it.
And Linda made the comment that some guilt on top of the grief is horrific. Absolutely. That is definitely true. So this is also why recognition is that first piece before you can build that container and before you can honor anything. You have to know that what you're feeling is real. And to some people who have not been experienced being within the organization, you might be like, what do you mean you can't feel it? But because of what we have gone through, that's something that we might have to take an actual step towards, is recognizing that what we were feeling was real, and that it's allowed to be here. And it's also not a sign of weakness. It's a sign from our bodies that it's finally feels safe enough for you to tell the truth.
What you said there a minute ago, Shannon, about recognition in the first piece.
Yeah.
It reminds me of what's called the gate of awareness, and passing through that, and then everything kind of opens up. Once you see something, it's hard to unsee.
Very, very true.
Yeah.
So we're going to step in now to that piece about leaking and why grief can leak. Here's a piece that, your body is always trying to protect you, always, even when it doesn't feel like it is. And even when doing so feels confusing or inconvenient or scary, your body is always on your side. And when grief has nowhere to go, when it's been renamed and reframed and pushed down for years, our body is actually what ends up becoming the holding place for this, because something has to hold it. And it doesn't just disappear just because you weren't allowed to feel it. There are times that our body may whisper to us. So there might be a little bit of tension, a little bit of fatigue, a weird ache that, comes and goes. And you can ignore those for a really long time. And a lot of us did that. And then there are times that our body will actually scream, and it screams in the form of something that you can't ignore anymore, like a diagnosis, a breakdown, a health crisis that shows up, it appears to show up out of nowhere. That's not our bodies betraying us. It's actually getting loud enough to where we have to listen. So one of the things with my journey, I truly believe that it was unaddressed grief that contributed to my body presenting cancer. And I'm not saying that just, to try to shock anybody or scare anybody. It's because my journey helped me to see that connection. Now, the detox that I told you about earlier and the cancer aren't separate things. They're actually, it's like my body is the same body. It's still working at making sure that I'm listening and paying attention, but in different ways and in different times. So I look at the lymph detox, that was kind of a whisper. The cancer was a scream. And I'm truly grateful for both of them, because the cancer journey is what taught me how to listen. It taught me that my body had been carrying things that I never gave myself permission to feel. And it's what taught me that healing wasn't just physical, and that there was a lot of what I was carrying wasn't medical at all. It actually was grief that had nowhere to go.
Yeah, I got to be honest with you. Hearing Shannon say that out loud now, it's hard, to hear it. Hard for me, because when somebody you love is in the middle of cancer, you're not thinking about grief. Thinking about getting through the next appointment, right? The next scan, the next doctor's appointment, the next surgery. But looking back now, I can see that. I can see what she's saying is the body had been holding things for quite some time, and eventually it asked for those things to be looked at, you can say. And here's what I'd like for you to take from this. Whatever your version of that is, for you, whether it's something that's showing up in your health, or whether it's something quieter than you've been just kind of brushing it off. Your body isn't the problem. Your body is a messenger. If that makes sense. Pushing grief down doesn't make it go away or make it smaller somehow. It just changes the address it shows up at, you could say. And sometimes that address is your sleep. Sometimes it's in your relationships. Sometimes it's your immune system. Sometimes it's something a doctor can put a name to. But it didn't come out of nowhere. It came from somewhere that it had been kind of waiting, Yeah.
Yeah. So like Linda talked a little bit about earlier, or chatted in there, when we say that grief can live in the body, we mean that literally. This isn't a metaphor. It's actually what can happen when something real doesn't get to move. But the good news is the same body that's been holding it can actually also release it. And so what we need to do is figure out how to give it somewhere to go. And so we're gonna expand on that. Okay. So if your body's the messenger, and if grief that has nowhere to go ends up living somewhere that it shouldn't, then let's talk about where it ends up leaking into. Because that grief window that that never closed. For most of us, it was never opened, and nobody ever handed us that idea and said, here's a safe space for this, and here's how to let it move through. And so the grief does what it does when there's no container, it seeps. And so some of the places that it'll show up, now this isn't, by any means to diagnose yourself or anything like that, but you can recognize what you may be living with and may not have identified it before. So sleep is always like one of the first places that we might recognize grief coming up. It's when our defenses are down. So whatever you're managing all day, it has access to you at night. And so for some, that may look like you're sleeping too much, or another thing, you might be using it as an escape because being awake feels too heavy. And so others, it might be the total opposite. You can't fall asleep. Your mind won't stop. Or you sleep, but you wake up in the middle of the night, or you wake up exhausted. And you wake up and it's like, even before your feet hit the floor, you can feel the weight. So that isn't a sleep problem. A lot of times it's grief looking for somewhere to be. And so another area is relationships. And this one can be painful because the people that are closest to us often will catch the most of it. You get irritable for reasons that you can't explain, or you may end up pulling away before anybody can pull away from you. So you might be the one that pulls away first, right? And you might end up, to me, this reminds me so much of Johnny when we first got together. You'll test the people you love without even realize that you're doing it. And you sabotage what you want the most because some part of you doesn't believe that you deserve it. See, like when we first got married, that's what Johnny did. He did everything in his power to try to sabotage our relationship. And it wasn't because he didn't love me, but because this grief from the past he had carried that for so long that he didn't believe that he deserved to be loved. And that wasn't a character flaw of his. That was a way of his grief that was leaking into a place that it shouldn't have to live.
That's right. Yeah, she's definitely correct there. And it took me a long time to see that for what that I was doing wasn't about her, right? It was about me bracing for something that I've been bracing for years. Okay, that's how it leaks into relationships. And the third place there is I want to name is your health, because we touched on this on the last slide, but I want to put numbers on it for you there. Chronic fatigue, you can't sleep off. Autoimmune flare-ups that your body literally attacking itself. Some digestive issues because your gut holds stress and grief, and headaches, and it just goes on and on there. You catch every little thing going around, inflammation, which is your body's response to unprocessed stress, just sitting there for so long. And that's not a list to try to scare you. That's just a list to tell you if any of this is going on, you're not crazy and you're not broken. Okay? You may be carrying something that your body is asking you to just to recognize and take a look at. And the last place, and this one's where it sneaks up on you, it's those random moments, right? Of the ambush, you could say. Maybe a song you weren't expecting, a smell you forgot that you knew in the past, date on a calendar, the anniversary of when you left, a holiday perhaps, where the whole world is celebrating family and yours is gone. Someone that you don't even know asking, do you have a family nearby? And you don't even know how to answer it. You'd be driving past the Kingdom Hall and they just hit you, you know? So those don't wait for a good time. They just come out of nowhere. And so that's grief without a container, like Shannon was saying before. It just shows up whenever it wants, when it has nowhere else to show up and to be.
One of the things too that we want to say too is, if you're experiencing these things, that doesn't mean that it is grief, but it's one of those things. We talk about being curious, always being curious, and to be able to have self-led lives and stuff. And so these health situations, especially that we're talking about here, we're not saying that these are the causes, the grief are the causes of that. But if we're curious, if we are experiencing things like this, is there any grief that may be going on in your life? So if you're sitting here listening to all of that, and if you see yourself in any of these places, you're not the problem. And the other thing too is you're not stuck here. By being able to have a container that can change this, and it doesn't happen all at once, but it takes time, and it also takes work. So let's dive in a little bit more. So we want to get into that piece that can help change that container. And now a container, what we mean by that is it's like a safe space, a safe place for something that has been waiting. And if you think about that word waiting, because whatever has been leaking out into our lives, it's waited for somewhere to be. It's not just going to automatically hit and then be leaking out. It's going to be there for a while, and it's waiting for you also to be ready. And so I want to tell you, I've got a little clip of a painting on here. I want to tell you a little bit about it. So my doctor painted this in 2011, and that was 5 years before he met me. So what you're looking at is birds with scars and broken pieces on their shells, and they're still moving. They're still in formation. They're still here. But I want you to think about this part, because every one of these birds, so it's eggs, they're birds, they're eggs with legs and stuff, but every one of them is carrying something, and every one of them is still marching along. And that's what a container can help us to do. It doesn't take any of the scars away, but it gives you somewhere to be while you're carrying that. So when you look at this slide, you can see the 4 pieces of a container, and I don't want you to think of that either as a checklist. Think of it as a build, something that you can construct over time. That place too, that's yours. It belongs to you. And there's a way of opening it. The other thing too is having that permission to feel what's there. Sometimes we have to give ourselves permission. And then there's the work to actually begin it. So it's these 4 pieces. That's when we talk about the container. That's what we're talking about. John, I'm sorry to hear about your losing your dad. So sorry for your loss.
Yeah, John, sorry about that. The piece I want you to land for you right now is what makes the container actually work. Because a container isn't a place that you find; it's a place that you decide to use. You can have all of it in front of you: the journal, the practitioner, the breakout, the show, all of it. None of it works until you decide it does. That's the part that nobody can do for you. And somebody else decided when you got to feel things. Somebody else decided what was an acceptable reason to to be sad, perhaps, or somebody else decided when you were supposed to be over it, or out here that's gone, and that's a good thing actually, but it also means that the container doesn't show up on its own, and you build it, you open it, you commit to it, and the practice, and it is a practice, is feeling without managing it, right? Without managing the feeling. Most of us got really good at managing, at keeping the lid on, at keeping the face right, and making sure nobody saw how heavy it actually was. Okay, and the container is where you stop doing that, at least for a little while. That's where the release can happen. And that's where the body can let it go.
Mm-hmm. A lot of us too, like, want to face things like we want to create that perfect environment, but this doesn't have to be a perfect container for us to start. You just need to start working with something that is yours, and somewhere that it actually gets to be what it is, even if that's just for a little while. So I'm curious if this makes sense and if this is resonating with these pieces that we're talking about with this grief window. So let us know in the chat what you guys think. Because now we want to talk about the piece that many of us are going to skip, and it's that closing ritual. One of the reasons that we end up skipping it is because when we were within the org, things didn't get closed. They just got shut down, stopped, disfellowshipped, walked away. No goodbye, no explanation. It's the rules. It's, whatever. And so we didn't have the opportunity to do that. And so our identities may have ended overnight, and you woke up one day and then the life that you had been living was just gone. There wasn't any marker or ritual or anything like that, no acknowledgement that anything had ever happened. And so a lot of us came out of here without, like John had talked about, that muscle of the closure and our reclamation, reclaiming our lives. And so without ever having to learn how to close something with purpose and on purpose, we just knew how to walk away or how to get walked away from. So the closing ritual is actually that piece that we're building. And it's that choice to mark a moment and to say that something real happened here. And the other thing is, I'm the one who gets to decide when it's complete. That's the agency piece. Now, when I was going through the cancer journey, I had closing rituals. And I had them everywhere. Some of them I planned, and some of them just happened. So, I showed the picture of when I was shared earlier. There's that picture of me, and is kind of behind the one of me and John. What it said on the top, that T-shirt. So I specifically chose this T-shirt for the day that I had my surgery. And that T-shirt said, "Stay calm and save the tatas." So I still have that. I still have the T-shirt today, but it marked that it was that reclamation point, that demarcation in the sand, you could say, of me passing from, one milestone through that journey. And so, and some of the other things that I did as rituals was making art for my doctor, as a way to say thank you as well as goodbye at the same time. Another one was like stopping the IVs, and that one was a challenge because it felt scary to actually, I'd been so committed to those IVs. I had done IVs for like 2 years, like every week for 2 years. And so being able to, it wasn't, it was a challenge to let go, but yet it was also a ritual of closing. And then even like leaving Boeing, when I worked with Boeing, that was another one. So another huge one, huge, is starting this work with John. And so every single one of these rituals for me was a way of me saying this chapter is closing. And I'm the one that gets to close it. Nobody is closing it for me. And one of the interesting things, though, my body like speaks to me so much. So my acupuncturist, when I left Boeing, told me to take 2 full weeks off so that I could honor like clothes that have this. He told me, it's like, have that ritual, honor leaving Boeing, honor that time frame. And I was like, yeah, whatever. And when you know, my knee went out for no reason. It wasn't like I had tripped. It wasn't like I had done anything. I didn't bump it. I didn't fall. I didn't overwork out, nothing. There was no reason for my knee to go out. But for exactly 2 weeks, my body said, we're having a closing ritual. And when I tried to skip it, that's what happened. And John and I, it was kind of a bummer because John and I had Seahawks tickets. And I couldn't go to the game because I couldn't walk. I couldn't put any weight on my leg. And 2 weeks later, I was walking again. It was like, so it appeared poof and it went away poof. It was the craziest thing.
And there was no injury or anything like that. So as far as physical injury.
Yeah.
So what I'd like you to hear about Shannon's story is that the closing ritual doesn't have to be some huge deal. It doesn't have to be some sort of ceremony. It doesn't have to be witnessed by anybody. It just has to be intentional, right? A walk you take on purpose, a letter that you write and don't send, perhaps, a photo that you put away, a drive past somewhere that used to mean something to you with some sort of different intention or purpose behind it than before. The point isn't the act. It's the point is that you're doing it. That you're the one doing it, and you're the one deciding that it's complete, right, finished. For a lot of us, that's the first thing that's been ours in a long time.
Yeah. So this is the rest of the painting that, before on the slide before I showed you the bottom where all of those eggs with legs were walking along. And so this is the rest of it. That bird that actually is has broken open, and now is getting ready to fly. That's what becomes possible. And it's not in spite of our scars. It's actually with them.
Yeah.
All righty. So it's all you, bud. Yeah.
I'm doing okay. So I'd like to walk you through this, how this looks for me with Tomas, my son. As I told you the story earlier, I want to see how it maps to what we've been talking about tonight. Okay? One window, 4 pieces that you can see there. First one was recognition. Okay, something hit me. And I didn't see it coming. I had no idea what it was. I just knew I couldn't hold it. And that's the moment that a lot of people don't recognize and they miss. Because if you can't name it, the temptation is to push past it. And I almost did. And the second was the leak. The grief had been in my body for a week before I knew it. The calendar, you could say, was holding it. And I wasn't. That's what unprocessed grief can do in our body. And it waits in there and uses whatever's available to get your attention. Okay, look at me. The third was the container, and the container in that moment was just the phone call, reaching out. That's it. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have some sort of script that I was trying to follow. I just had Shannon on the other end of the line, and I just let it happen. Just move through it. And then the fourth, as you can see, is the closing ritual. And the next morning, I connected the dots, and I let it have a name again. Said it out loud, and that was that's where it closed. And that's what we mean when we say you can build this. It's not a theory. I mean, you're already doing it or close to it. Now, the moments throughout your life, we're just giving you language in order to recognize it for what it is and to practice it more and make it intentional, with some sort of purpose behind it.
So does this relate? Does this make sense now that John kind of walked through this, the recognition, the leak, the container? Does that all make sense to everybody? I'm curious. Yes, no, maybe?
Just as a reminder, I can't see any of the comments on my end.
I'll read them to you. So see why we need Ruby back? We absolutely need Ruby back. We're working there. We're getting closer. So if any of you are ready and you'd like to kind of come and share a thought about tonight's topic, we invite you to come to the stage. I just put the link out there to join us on stage. And, if anything landed for you tonight, or did you notice something that you may not have noticed before in regards to grief? Anybody would like to come up? And we can always kind of come back to it too if we need to.
Absolutely, it'll be there. And obviously, if just coming up on stage tonight isn't where you're at, that's all right. Listening is, we appreciate that. It's participating and right where you need to be. So just you being here is the work.
Yeah. Well, I'll keep an eye on that, but for now, because like we said, Johnny may end up having to go boom like that. So we're gonna keep going. If any of you do want to come up and share some of your thoughts, please feel free to use the link.
I'd like to share another idea with you there. When we say container, we're not saying some sort of tidy, perfect thing, right? It's not solved. We're not saying you're going to stop missing what you lost. And you're not, that's not the goal here, I'm trying to say. What we're saying is you don't have to be ambushed by this anymore, right? It sneaks up on you, and you just have no idea what it is. And you can't put a name to it. Because the grief doesn't get smaller. It just stops being everywhere, right? And that's a different life than the one many that have been living. Where the grief is in your sleep, it's in your work, it's in your relationships, it's in the way you talk to yourself when no one else is there listening. You don't have to keep living like that. You can start building something else. One conversation, right? One walk on purpose, just one page in a journal that nobody else gets to read. That's how a container can start.
Mm-hmm. And we know that, John made the comment, we don't have to be ambushed. There's going to be times where we may feel like grief does ambush us. but by practicing different tools, identifying what tool works for you, learning about different tools and identifying which one works for you can help you if you do feel like you've been ambushed as well.
Yeah.
So next week, we're going to be talking about something that many people may have been waiting to go to, even if you didn't know about it. We're going to be talking about anger. And, and this can be like that anger that we were never allowed to have before.
So it looks like, let's see. Yeah, and this one's going to be heavy. So, in a different way, because in there, anger wasn't just a scourge, it also got mislabeled. It got made into a spiritual problem, and for many of us, it got coiled up inside for years. And for a lot of you, leaving is what finally let it loose. And now you don't know what to do with it. So, my guy is here.
Okay.
I'm gonna have to check out. I appreciate each and every one of you, Shannon. You got this. I'll see you next week, everyone. Thank you.
All right, drive safe, bud.
I will. Bye for now. I love you.
All right, love you too.
Bye.
All right, so next week we're going to be talking about, about anger and how we can honor it and how also we can let it move without taking over, having it take over our life. So we want to invite you to come back. And as I see, this was another slide that kind of goofed up on me. So, oh well, I'm not perfect. And then as always too, Monday night. So tomorrow night, we continue this conversation. We go deeper. We've got a Facebook group called the Exit Generation. And at 4 p.m. Pacific and 7 p.m. Eastern, we dive deeper into these questions. And these are the ones that we take turns in hearing about how this resonates with us. This is where we hold space for each other in those questions. And it's, I've really enjoyed the conversations that we've had. We've had several really, really good conversations in the future or in the past sessions. We do record them. And so if you are somebody who isn't comfortable with being recording, you can still come if you want. You can change your name on the Zoom. You can keep your camera turned off, stuff like that. But we'd love to have you there. Now, if you're not in the Exit Generation group yet, that link is in our description on our YouTube channel. So, or you can do a search in Facebook. Come find us, because that's where we're starting to build community, and also having the opportunity to practice, like, what do I think about this? How do I feel about that? How is this affecting my body and stuff? So we really want to invite anybody to come and join us and have those conversations. This was a way that John and I actually had a great deal of growth personally. Is we did exercises like this where we did investigate some of the questions that our coach would teach on a subject, and then he would present 4 questions, and we got to answer them ourselves. So it gave us the opportunity to not only look inside and look at ourselves and what we were thinking, but we also got to practice our voice and be able to share some of our ideas in front of other people that were very supporting. So we really want to have you join us. So please, please, please come and join the Exit Generation. Find me on Facebook if you can't find it, and I'm happy to send you the link to that. So as always too, we always want to close with a quote. And when I saw this one, I thought that it really stood out. Out of suffering have emerged the strongest souls, and the most massive characters are seared with scars. And I just felt that was so powerful and so relatable to like what we were talking about tonight. The scars part, that's very, very powerful. And I know even if I look at literal scars, for me with going through the cancer journey, when I look at those things, I know that I have emerged. I've gone through so much, and I can look at that because of the lessons that I learned along the way. Those scars actually are positive to me. Alrighty, so you guys showed up tonight. Thank you for being in the chat. Whatever this week took out of you and however heavy you walked, I'm so glad that you are here. And a few ways that you can stay connected are right there on the screen. You can learn more about us and what's planned in coming up here on Deservingly You at the ExJW.org. You click on the events button. It'll take you, if you scroll down the page, it'll take you to a calendar and it shows some of the topics. And if you would like to support the show, you can do that at ko-fi.com/deservingly you. Every bit helps us to keep showing up for you and to keep serving you. And then once again, Monday is our breakout inside the Exit Generation on Facebook. That's 4 p.m. Pacific and 7 p.m. Eastern. And that's where those conversations really keep going. And it's very fascinating to see what comes up in those conversations. So that's what we have for you tonight. Thank you for being here. Thank you too for trusting us with this space, with whatever brought you here tonight. And if this was helpful, please like, subscribe, and hit notify. If you're on, I'm hearing if you're on a tablet or a phone, you might even be able to hit hype. So come find us inside the Exit Generation and Fit in the Facebook world, and we will see you guys next week. So thanks a bunch.